Captain Marcus Chen had seen many things during his 15 years patrolling the Outer Rim territories, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that greeted him in the cargo hold of the derelict Zephyrian transport vessel. Among the scattered debris and failing life support systems, a mother clutched her child, both members of the insectoid Zephyrian species that had been at war with the Terran Federation for the past decade. The mother's chitinous exoskeleton was cracked and bleeding. The blue ichor that served as Zephyrian blood. Her compound eyes, normally a brilliant gold, had dulled to a sickly amber. But it was the desperation in those alien features that struck him most profoundly. "Please," she whispered in broken standard, her voice a series of clicks and whistles that his universal translator struggled to process. "Just feed my daughter, human. I'll stay quiet. I'll cook. I'll stay in your bed." The words came out in a rush of shame and terror. She begged. The child, no more than what humans would consider 8 years old, was unconscious in her mother's arms, her smaller exoskeleton already showing signs of malnutrition. Marcus had been briefed on Zephyrian biology. Their young required a specific protein synthesis every 6 hours, or they would begin to deteriorate rapidly. Behind him, Sergeant Williams shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, protocol dictates we take them to the nearest detention facility. They're enemy combatants." Marcus studied the pair. The war had been brutal on both sides. Zephyrian raids on human colonies had left thousands dead. Human retaliation had been swift and merciless. But looking at this mother and child, Marcus saw something that transcended species boundaries, the universal language of parental love and desperation. "Belay that, Sergeant," Marcus said quietly. "Get medical down here immediately, and have the quartermaster prepare a nutrient synthesis compatible with Zephyrian physiology." "Sir?" Williams's voice carried a note of incredulity. "These are Zephyrians. They're refugees," Marcus cut him off. "A mother and her sick child." As the medical team arrived, Marcus knelt beside the Zephyrian mother. She flinched, expecting violence, but instead found herself looking into eyes that held no hatred, only understanding. "What's your name?" He asked gently. "Kelthara," she replied, her voice barely audible. "My daughter, Zississa." "Kelthara, I'm Captain Chen. We're going to help your daughter. No conditions, no payment required." The Zephyrian mother's compound eyes widened in disbelief. In her culture, nothing came without a price, especially from enemies. She had offered the only currency she thought she possessed, herself. Dr. Sarah Okafor, the ship's chief medical officer, ran her scanners over the unconscious child. "Severe protein deficiency, dehydration, and what looks like the early stages of exoskeleton deterioration," she reported. "But it's treatable if we act quickly." As they transported Zississa to the medical bay, Kelthara remained close, expecting at any moment to be separated from her child or worse. Instead, she found herself in a clean medical facility where humans worked with the same dedication to save her daughter as they would one of their own. "Why?" she asked Marcus as they watched the medical team work. "Your people and mine. We are enemies." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because before we were enemies, we were both just trying to survive in a hostile universe. Because that's a mother protecting her child, and any species that's made it to the stars understands that bond." Over the following days, as Zississa recovered, something remarkable happened aboard the UTS Endeavor. The crew, initially suspicious and hostile, began to see the Zephyrians not as monsters from enemy propaganda, but as individuals. Kelthara, grateful and still expecting the worst, began helping in the ship's hydroponics bay, her species' natural affinity for plant cultivation proving invaluable. Zississa, once recovered, displayed the curious nature common to children everywhere. She followed the crew around with her large compound eyes taking in everything. her clicking vocalizations gradually incorporating human words. "The girl learns fast," observed Lieutenant Torres, the ship's communications officer, as Zississa successfully interfaced with one of the computer terminals using her natural bioelectric abilities. She managed to optimize our communication array efficiency by 12%. It was then that Marcus realized something profound. The war between humans and Zephyrians had begun over resource disputes and territorial expansion. But at its core, both species were seeking the same thing, a future for their children. When they reached the Kepler station, Marcus faced a decision. Protocol demanded he turn the refugees over to military authorities. Instead, he filed a formal request for asylum on their behalf, citing their potential value as cultural ambassadors and technical advisors. The request was initially denied, but Zississa's modifications to the communication array had been noted by Starfleet Engineering. Her mother's botanical expertise had resulted in a 23% increase in food production efficiency. More importantly, their presence had begun to humanize the enemy in the eyes of the crew. 6 months later, Captain Chen received word that Kelthara and Zississa had been granted full refugee status and were working with the diplomatic corps on the first peace negotiations between humans and Zephyrians in over a decade. In his report to Starfleet Command, Marcus wrote, "Sometimes humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our military might. It's our ability to see beyond the surface, to recognize that compassion isn't a weakness. It's the foundation upon which civilization is built. When a mother begged us to feed her child, we could have seen an enemy seeking advantage. Instead, we saw what we truly were, two species capable of choosing hope over hatred. The war didn't end overnight, but it began to end in the cargo hold of a derelict ship, when a human captain chose to see a desperate mother rather than an enemy combatant, and proved that sometimes the most human thing you can do is simply be human." Kelthara never forgot that first moment when Marcus knelt beside her not as a conqueror, but as someone who understood that love transcends species and that feeding a hungry child is always the right choice. Years later, when the peace treaty was finally signed, both Kelthara and Zississa stood beside Captain Chen as witnesses to what could be accomplished when beings chose compassion over conflict.